Poor girl paid a stranger's bus fare. She had no idea he was a millionaire CEO in disguise. It was just $1. A crumpled, rain-soaked bill pulled from the bottom of her coat pocket. She handed it to the bus driver without thinking, never looking at the man behind her. Never knowing he'd just lost everything that wasn't real and found the one thing that was. That's how it begins. Not with a kiss, not with a promise, but with a girl who had nothing left and still chose to give. She didn't mean to notice him, not at first. The rain had softened to a quiet drizzle as the city bus hissed to a stop on Meeting Street, its doors groaning open. Julia Monroe adjusted the collar of her thrift store coat, rain clinging to her dark curls like dew on morning grass. She stepped on board, exhaustion written in her bones after a 12-hour diner shift that left grease on her knuckles and worry in her chest. $2, the driver muttered without looking up. She dug into her coat pocket, loose change, a faded receipt, one crumpled bill. Barely enough. Behind her, someone stepped up, hesitated. I don't have anything, a man's voice said, rough and low. I was robbed. I just need to get home. Julia turned instinctively. He looked out of place, drenched, disoriented, and wearing a shirt that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hands were shaking slightly. No phone, no wallet, just the look of someone who had hit a wall for the first time in a long time. The driver rolled his eyes. No story, no ride. And that should have been the end of it. Another stranger with a sob story. But something in the man's expression wasn't desperation. It was disbelief, as if life had suddenly stopped making sense. Julia handed over her last dollar. He's with me. The bus went silent. The man stared at her, unsure whether to feel grateful or ashamed. She didn't wait for thanks, just walked to the back and sat by the window, arms wrapped tight across her chest. He followed, quietly. Their eyes met for only a second, long enough. She would forget the rain, the smell of bus diesel, even the ache in her feet. But she'd remember the look in his eyes. Not just surprise, but something else. Recognition. Like a man seeing something he hadn't known he'd lost and realizing he couldn't look away. That night, Julia walked home in the cold with just 57 cents in her pocket and no umbrella. She didn't think twice about what she'd done. To her, it was nothing. To him, it would become everything. Chapter 1, The Last Dollar. Rain in Charleston doesn't fall, it lingers, like a memory. It clung to the rooftops, slid softly down the wrought iron balconies, and pooled in the cobbled cracks of King Street. Julia Monroe clutched her diner apron in one hand, a paper bag of leftover muffins in the other, and hurried past the flickering neon light of the liquor store. Her shift had ended late, again. The manager had forgotten to clock her out, again, and the pain in her feet had settled somewhere deep enough that she'd stopped noticing. The only thing on her mind was the bus. The stop was 4 blocks down. The rain turned from drizzle to mist. Her coat was soaked, her toes numb, but she didn't complain. That was Julia's way. Quiet, enduring, resilient, in the face of everything life kept taking away. At the corner, she heard it, the hiss of brakes, the deep rumble of the night bus pulling in. She picked up her pace. Behind her, someone else was running. Fast footsteps on wet pavement. She didn't turn. In this part of town, keeping your eyes forward was a form of survival. She stepped onto the bus just in time, breathing hard. $2, the driver said, chewing a toothpick like it owed him rent. Julia reached into her coat pocket, fished out a crumpled bill and 4 tarnished coins. Her fingers were cold. She counted carefully, heart sinking. She had exactly $2.08. It was all she had left until payday. She handed it over with a polite nod and moved down the aisle. Then came the voice behind her, rough, low, unexpectedly composed. I don't have cash. I was robbed tonight. Please, I just need to get home. The driver didn't even blink. No money, no ride. Try walking. I'm serious. They took everything. My car, phone, wallet. That's what they all say, the driver snapped. Julia turned her head slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of him. He didn't look like a man who begged. He looked out of place, expensive coat wrinkled, tailored dress shirt untucked beneath the rain, a thin cut on his jaw where stubble met skin. His hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles white, like he was holding together the last shreds of dignity. The driver moved to close the door. "I'll pay," Julia said suddenly. The driver looked up. "What?" I said, "I'll cover his fare." The stranger turned, startled. His eyes locked onto hers. Deep gray, stormy, unreadable. "You don't have to." "I already did," she said, voice flat. She handed the driver the last dollar and walked back to her seat, fast, before the man could say another word. Her hands shook a little. The bus lurched forward. He stood near the front for a second, stunned, then slowly made his way down the aisle. He didn't sit beside her, just 2 rows up, angled slightly, like someone who didn't know where he belonged. Outside the window, the city blurred in streaks of gold and gray. Inside, the silence between them felt thick. He kept glancing over his shoulder. Julia didn't look up. He waited until her stop neared. As she rose from her seat, her finger still wrapped around the paper bag of muffins, he stood. "Oh, wait," he said, voice quieter now. I didn't thank you." She looked at him. Really looked this time. Wet hair stuck to his forehead. His tie had come undone. He looked like a man who'd never been told no. Until tonight. "It's just a bus ride," she murmured. "No, it's not," he said. "Not tonight." She gave him a faint, tired smile. Everyone needs help sometimes. Then she stepped off the bus and into the night. He watched her go, watched her fade into the rain like a story he'd almost missed. He didn't know her name. We didn't know who she was. But one thing he knew for sure. He would see her again. He had to. Chapter 2. The Diner Girl. The next morning, William Carter stood in the shower far longer than usual. Steam rose around him, fogging the glass, but it didn't clear the memory of her face. That girl. The one with the tired eyes and the voice that didn't shake. The one who gave him her last dollar like it meant nothing. Like he wasn't just some soaked stranger who had no business being saved. He'd woken in his penthouse with damp clothes on the floor and one question in his mind. Who was she? William wasn't the kind of man to wonder about strangers. Most people came into his life with contracts, conditions, or expectations. But she expected nothing. And that haunted him. By noon, he'd made a decision. "James," he said, standing in the lobby of Carter Towers, the sharp lines of his tailored coat concealing the restless energy beneath. James Holloway, his family's longtime attorney and closest confidant, raised an eyebrow. "You're supposed to be in a meeting with the investors. Reschedule it. I need you to find something for me." He pulled a worn bus schedule from his pocket. "I took this line last night. I want to know what diners are within walking distance of the stops along it. Small ones, local, one that hires girls in navy blue aprons." James blinked. "Is this some kind of—" "No." William's voice softened. "Just find her." 3 hours later, William pushed open the door of Palmetto Diner on Rutledge Avenue. A silver bell jingled overhead. The smell hit him first. Warm bread, burnt coffee, and syrup-drenched hope. The place was nothing special. Faded red booths, cracked tiles, and an old radio playing country love songs just off-key. But it was alive, bustling with quiet routine, locals leaning over mugs, the kind of place where time moves slower. And there she was, behind the counter, her hair in a ponytail, face flushed with effort, scribbling on an order pad with a pencil chewed at both ends. William stood still. His world, one of rooftop lounges and 7-figure deals, narrowed into this single frame, a girl wiping down counters like it was an art, speaking softly to a crying toddler, folding napkins with practiced grace. She hadn't seen him yet. The waitress brushed past him with a stack of plates. "Sit anywhere you like," she said without looking. William slid into a corner booth, watched, waited. Then her eyes found him. Her body stilled. For one brief second, he saw the recognition flicker. Surprise, confusion, something else. but she said nothing. Just walked over, pen still in hand. "You," she murmured. He tilted his head slightly, his lips curving. "Me. What are you doing here?" "I came to settle a debt." She frowned. "Debt? You paid for my bus fare." She crossed her arms. "That wasn't a loan." He smiled. "Then, consider this interest." He nodded toward the coffee machine. "May I buy you a cup?" Julia hesitated, her fingers twitching over her order pad. "You don't have to," he said gently. "You can pretend I never came in. I'll walk out right now." She stared at him, and for a moment William felt something inside him shift. "I have 10 minutes, she said finally, and walked off to grab a mug. When she returned, she poured the coffee and set it in front of him. He took a sip. It was terrible. Burnt. Over-brewed. Still, it tasted like the only honest thing he'd had in months. "Been working here long?" he asked. 2 years, she leaned against the counter. "And before you ask? No, this wasn't part of the plan." "What was?" She gave a small laugh. "College. A bakery, a front porch, and a dog that doesn't bark too loud. It sounds..." He searched for the right word. "Rare." She shrugged. "Rare doesn't mean impossible." William looked down at his cup. "What about you?" she asked suddenly. "What do you do?" He hesitated. Truth would ruin this. Truth would make her lean back and build walls. "I work in hospitality," he said instead. That wasn't a lie, it just wasn't the whole truth. She nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "So that explains the expensive shoes and the lost wallet?" He smiled. "Bad night. Worse luck." Her shift was ending. She turned to walk away, then paused. "You still didn't tell me your name." "William," he said. He stood. "It's good to meet you, Julia, again." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. As he walked out, the silver bell jingled again, and the door shut behind him. From the street, he glanced back once, just in time to see her watching him from behind the counter. She turned away before he could wave. But that was fine. He wasn't rushing this. He'd just found something real, and for the first time in years, he wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers. Morning coffee, midnight truths. The second time he came in, she didn't act surprised. She'd just poured his coffee without asking and placed it in front of him with a look that said, "Don't read into this." But William wasn't reading. He was watching. Quietly. Julia didn't smile much, but she listened with her whole face. That morning, the diner was quieter than usual, a lull between regulars. Outside, the sky was still undecided, somewhere between gray and soft gold, the kind of morning that felt like a memory even as it unfolded. "I thought you said you worked nights," he said, lifting his coffee. "I switch when they need me," she replied. "Bills don't pay themselves." "Do you ever get time off?" She smirked. "Why, planning to whisk me away on a private jet?" He almost choked on the sip he was taking, not because it wasn't possible, but because she said it like a joke and not like a dream. "I was thinking more like a walk, somewhere less fluorescent." Julia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just slightly, reading him like a book she wasn't sure she wanted to finish. "You always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're selling something, but I can't tell if it's coffee or confession." William paused, set the cup down. "You ever feel like no one actually listens?" he asked. "All the time." They sat with that. "Why do you keep coming here?" she asked. He glanced around. The ambiance, the music, the charming waitstaff. She rolled her eyes. "Try again." "Because," he said, "you don't ask for anything." Her voice was quiet, and, "That's rare?" He nodded. She studied him for a moment. "People usually want something from you?" "And what if I told you I don't?" "Then I'd believe you," he said, "and I'd wonder why that scares me." She didn't reply right away. Then, "What do you miss most?" The question caught him off guard. William leaned back, thought, then said, "The sound of my mom's voice when she made French toast on Sunday mornings. I haven't heard that in years." She looked at him differently after that, like she saw past the shirt and the watch, and the way he never quite slouched. He watched her fingers play with the edge of the order pad. Then she looked up and said something that surprised them both. "I want to open a bakery one day." "Really?" She nodded. "I have a list of recipes taped to the fridge. I collect them like prayers." What's stopping you? She tapped her chest, then her temple, then her apron. Money, time, and whatever's left of my faith in the system. He didn't answer right away, because something about her words made him feel like she had just cracked something open and didn't even know it. I think, he said slowly, you already have what you need. She laughed once, gently. You don't even know me. I know enough. Julia looked at him then, like she was searching for the catch, the punchline, the angle, the trick. But it didn't come. She had met men before who talked big, smiled easy, and left when the lights got too bright. But this one, he looked like he'd been through something. Something that had made him quieter, not louder. Tell me one thing that's true, she said suddenly. William held her gaze. I didn't come here for the coffee. He stared at him for a long second, then walked away without a word. But he smiled anyway, because silence with her was starting to feel like a promise. Chapter 4. A Man Without a Name. She didn't know why she started noticing the little things. Maybe it was the way he held his cup. Not like someone nursing caffeine, but like someone who had been served at too many boardrooms. Maybe it was how he listened, too carefully, like a man trained to make people feel seen without being seen himself. Julia didn't trust that, because people who came in looking for nothing rarely left without taking something. She didn't ask questions at first, let the routine form. He came in every morning just after the early rush. She poured his coffee without asking. He left a tip, too big for a man who claimed he worked in hospitality. He asked about her mother once. She answered without hesitating. She taught high school English for 20 years, got sick 3 years ago. Now I'm teaching myself to stretch rice and coupons into miracles. And he just nodded, like he'd heard stories like that before, but still felt each one hit like a bruise. That day, she walked home after her shift with her headphones in, trying not to think about him. But when she got home, he was there. Not William, but his shadow. She saw it in a magazine on the porch. Her mom subscribed to an old national weekly, mostly for the crossword. This issue had a glossy spread on top resorts in the South. Carter hotels, where luxury has a name. The headline sat beneath a photograph of a beachfront property drenched in golden light. And next to it, a picture of 3 men in suits, one of whom looked eerily familiar. She stared at it for a long time. The face wasn't exactly the same. Cleaner, colder. But the eyes? The eyes were unmistakable. He looked like a man wearing a version of himself like armor. Something wrong? Her mom called from the kitchen. No, Julia lied, sliding the magazine beneath the mail stack. Just junk. That night, she sat on the front porch, knees pulled up, watching the rain drip from the railing. She wanted to believe that it was a coincidence, that her mind was playing tricks. But deep down, she already knew. The next morning, he came in just the same, like nothing had shifted. But something had. You ever heard of Carter hotels? She asked casually as she poured his coffee. He blinked, just once, too fast, too sharp. Yes, he said carefully. Big chain. Why? She shrugged. Was reading about it. Seems like a whole different world. He stirred his coffee, then took a sip. Depends on the world you're trying to escape. She didn't push further. Not then. But later, when he left and the bell above the door chimed its usual farewell, she found herself watching his shadow on the sidewalk. Not his face. His outline. As if the truth about him lived in the parts that didn't speak. She wanted to ask him who he really was, but she wasn't sure she was ready to hear the answer. That night, Julia dreamed of doors. One she could open, and one he kept locked. The lie between us. It started with the kind of silence that feels like a confession. They were walking side by side, their footsteps in sync down an old brick path near the marina. The sea air was soft, warm. A breeze moved the strands of Julia's hair, but she didn't push them back. She was too busy listening, not to his words, but to what he wasn't saying. They'd spent the afternoon at a local food truck fair. William had insisted, said he needed a break from polished things. Julia didn't know how to explain it, but he looked at home here. More human, somehow, eating cornbread off a paper plate and wiping barbecue sauce from his wrist with a napkin that wouldn't cooperate. They'd laughed, talked about everything, almost. And now, the sun was low and golden behind the water, painting halos around boats bobbing in the harbor. She glanced at him. "What's the real reason you're in Charleston?" she asked softly. William hesitated, just for a breath, and smiled like a man trying to distract her with charm. "I told you, needed a reset." "That's not an answer." He stopped walking. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then he said, "Sometimes, the world you're born into feels like a room with no windows. Beautiful, maybe, but you can't breathe." She turned toward him, her voice lower now. "And what are you running from?" His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something raw there, something fragile. "Everything that was handed to me," he said, "everything I didn't choose." Julia swallowed. She understood that, more than she wanted to admit. The silence between them changed, deepened. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating off him. His hand brushed against hers. It would have been so easy to lean in, to close the space, to fall into the thing that had been building between them. Quiet, unspoken, magnetic. But just then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't answer it, but Julia caught the name on the screen before he turned it away. "James, legal affairs?" Her breath caught. She pulled back. Not enough to draw attention, but enough that he noticed. "You're not who you say you are," she whispered. His mouth parted, not to lie, but to stall, and that was worse. "You've been honest with me about your dreams," she said, "but not about your name." Willem looked at her, his jaw tense. "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I just didn't want it to matter." "To me?" she asked. He didn't answer. She took a step back, shaking her head, not in anger but in disbelief. "I'm not mad that you're rich. I'm mad that you let me believe you were something else." "Julia?" "No," she said. "You don't get to call me that like we're still on a bus." He looked like he'd just been slapped. Not hard, but deeply. And still, she didn't walk away, not yet. "I don't care how many zeros are in your bank account," she said, "but I care that you didn't trust me with the truth." He reached for her hand. She let him. But her eyes were full of questions now, and for the first time since they met, he didn't have answers. Just silence. And between them, that silence began to feel like a wall, the name in the news. The diner TV was always on, usually tuned to the local news or muted reruns that played in the background like wallpaper. But that morning, the volume was up, and William was on the screen. Julia didn't hear the headline at first, only caught the shape of his name as it moved across the ticker. William Carter to assume full control of Carter Resorts after father's sudden retirement. She froze. There he was, her William, standing behind a podium at a luxury gala. A tuxedo sculpted to his frame, cameras flashing like fireflies, his voice calm, measured, practical. "We believe in not just building resorts," he said, "but experiences that define legacy." Her stomach twisted. The man who'd told her he was taking a break had just taken the reins of a billion-dollar empire. Her hand gripped the edge of the counter. A customer laughed nearby. "That's the Carter kid. Looks too young to own the world, doesn't he?" Julia said nothing. She couldn't. Her heart was beating too fast. Her mouth had gone dry. She took off her apron slowly, folding it once, then again, and walked out. The sky was clear, painfully bright. Each footstep hit harder than the last. The streets she knew so well felt unfamiliar now, like they'd shifted under her while she wasn't looking. She didn't know what she was going to do until she was already doing it. She took a bus, the same route, same seat, but this time her hands weren't shaking from cold, they were shaking from disbelief. The Carter Hotel stood like a monument to everything she didn't belong to. All glass and light and impossible silence. At the front desk, the woman in the blazer gave her a look. "I need to see William Carter. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Julia said, her voice calm. "Tell him Julia is here. He'll see me." A pause, a look, then a call, and then, somehow, she was in the elevator. She didn't feel the ride, didn't register the numbers blinking upward. Her thoughts were too loud. He met her just outside the penthouse doors. He looked startled, unprepared. But she didn't give him time to speak. "I saw the news." His jaw tense. "You told me you were getting away from that world," she said, trying to keep her voice from breaking. "And now I see you in it, shining like you never left." "It's not what you think," he said. "Then tell me what it is." He stepped closer, hands open. "I didn't mean to lie. I wanted something real before all of this became official." She stared at him, and it hurt more than she expected. "Real?" she repeated. "You wanted real, but you gave me edited truths and borrowed time." His shoulders dropped. "I didn't know how to tell you. You shouldn't have waited. You should have trusted me." He nodded, quietly, almost shamefully. "I wanted you to know me without the name," he said. "I did," she said softly. "And now, I don't know what's real anymore." She turned to leave. He reached for her hand. "Please, don't go." She pulled away, gently. "You can't ask me to stay in a world you wouldn't even admit you came from." And then, with tears threatening to spill but not yet falling, she walked back into the elevator. She didn't look back. Not because she wasn't breaking, but because if she did, she knew he'd try to fix it. And for once, she needed to see if he'd choose to fix himself instead. Absolutely. Here's your cinematic storytelling prose for The Resignation. He sat alone in his office with the lights off. Just the city outside, gleaming, blinking, breathing a life he no longer wanted to be part of. The suit still fit, the view still stunned. But none of it meant anything. Not without her. The press had praised him. Shareholders had cheered. The company's stock had risen the moment he took the stage beside his father. But the only thing William Carter could think about was the look in Julia's eyes when she realized he hadn't told her the truth. Not rage, not hatred, just disappointment. And that, more than anything, broke him. He opened his drawer and pulled out the resignation letter he'd written weeks ago, back when he still didn't know if he'd need it. Now he did. The words weren't complicated. "I'm stepping away to pursue a different life. One I choose, one I build." He signed it, quietly. Then he picked up his phone and called the one man who'd always warned him this might happen. James answered on the second ring. "You're missing your meeting." "I'm not coming," William said. Silence. "I just emailed my resignation, make it official." James's voice dropped. "You're walking away from all of it." William looked out the window. "No, I'm walking towards something else." James sighed. "This about the girl?" William's grip tightened. "This is about me, and the man I'm finally willing to become." Pause. Then, "Good. About time." He hung up. And for the first time in years, William Carter felt like he could breathe. Across the city, Julia stood in the kitchen, her hands deep in a bowl of flour and cinnamon. Baking helped. Kneading calmed her. Her mother watched from the doorway, arms folded gently. "You gonna tell me what's got your chest tied up like that?" Julia didn't answer at first. "He lied," she said finally, but not with his words, with what he didn't say. Her mother nodded slowly. "That's the worst kind of lie. I don't know if I can trust someone who hides that much." "Maybe he was afraid," her mom offered. Julia wiped her hands on a towel. "Afraid of me? Afraid of what you'd make him feel?" The timer dinged. The bread was ready, but Julia didn't move. She stared out the window, thinking about his eyes, his silence, the way he looked at her like she was the first honest thing in his life. She missed him, but missing someone didn't erase what they'd broken. That night, the story broke. Every major news outlet carried it. William Carter resigns from Carter Resorts, chooses new direction. She read the headline once. That again. Then a third time, barely breathing. A single sentence stood out like a heartbeat on the page. Sources close to Carter say he left to pursue something more meaningful, a future he's building from the ground up. Julia dropped the newspaper and reached for her phone. Her fingers hesitated over the screen. She didn't know what to say, but she typed anyway. "Julia, we need to talk." Seconds later, it buzzed in her hand. "William, tell me where and when." Chapter 8: The Bakery Proposal. She chose the cafe near the park, the quiet one with chipped blue tables and a crooked open sign that swung with every breeze. He arrived before she did. No suit this time, no armor. Just jeans, a soft gray sweater, and a man who looked like he'd slept a little less, felt a little more, and meant every second of it. Julia stepped inside, the bell above the door singing a sound that felt too delicate for everything her heart was carrying. He stood when he saw her. She didn't speak at first, just sat across from him and studied his face, like a story she wasn't sure she believed anymore. "You really did it," she said. William nodded. "I meant what I said. I walked away. From billions. From something that wasn't mine," he said softly. "Not really." "And what now?" Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "You resigned, made headlines. But what does that change? It changes what I choose next." Their coffees arrived, untouched. "I didn't leave for you, Julia," he said quietly. "I left for me. But I came back for you." She looked down, breath caught somewhere in her chest. "I want to build something real," he continued. "From the ground up. No titles, no inheritance, just something that feels honest." She met his eyes, still searching for a catch. "And what does that look like?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo. A property on the coast, overgrown, a little forgotten, but with windows that caught the light like they remembered better days. "This place," he said. "It used to be a bed and breakfast. My parents took me there once before the empire swallowed everything. I bought it last week." She blinked. "You bought that?" He nodded. "I want to restore it, turn it into a small hotel. Nothing flashy, just something that means something." There was a... She leaned back, arms crossed. "And where do I come in?" William set the photo on the table between them. "I want you to open your bakery inside it." The words hung in the air like a dare. Julia stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. I don't want to give you a bakery, Julia. I want to build one with you. Yours. Your name. Your recipes. Your light." Her throat tightened. "This isn't how life works." "Maybe not," he said. "But maybe life's been doing it wrong." She looked at the photo again. The building wasn't much. Peeling paint, vines growing wild around the frame. But she could almost smell bread in the windows, hear laughter in the breeze, see sunlight spilling onto white tile and cafe tables. She could almost believe it. "I'd need control," she said quietly. "Full control. No compromises on the menu. None. I bake how I bake. That's the whole point." She met his gaze, and for the first time since the night she walked away, her voice cracked. "You really mean this?" William leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady and soft. "Julia," he said, "this started with $1, but it was never about the money. It was about the moment, the one where you saw me and didn't ask me to be anyone else." She swallowed hard. "I don't want to go back to pretending," he said. "I want something that feeds people, welcomes them, something with your heart in it." She reached for the photo, fingers trembling. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I'll do it," she said. "But only if we build it right." His smile came like a sunrise. "We will." And just like that, the future stopped being theoretical. It started, quietly, bravely, with flour, old wood, and the girl who believed in things no one else dared to dream. Chapter 9: What We Build. Some dreams come to life quietly, not with ribbon cuttings or applause, but with hammer dust on jeans and tired hands learning where sunlight falls best. That's how it began. Not with blueprints, but with her sketching the cafe's counter on a napkin, and him nodding like it was the most important map he'd ever seen. The building stood stubbornly against the Atlantic breeze, old, beautiful, and in worse shape than either of them expected. But Julia ran her fingers over the walls like they could remember. "This place has bones," she whispered. "And breath," William added. "We just have to give it a heartbeat." They worked every day. Julia juggled her diner shifts and late-night design boards. William met with contractors, fought off pressure from old business contacts, and learned to read spreadsheets that didn't involve profit margins. Just paint colors, brick repair, and coffee machine specs. But with every new step forward, a challenge waited. The first came as a folded envelope on the site's front gate. Foundation repair estimate, double the projected cost. Julia's chest tightened. They stood together in the shell of what would be the bakery, wind rattling through broken window frames. "We could cut costs," she said, eyes on the numbers. "Smaller ovens, cheaper fixtures." "No," William said. "We do it right. We build what you saw when you first looked at this place. But what if we run out? Then we slow down. We wait. But we don't build halfway." She looked at him then, really looked, not as a safety net, not as a rich man making a detour, but as a partner, a man who had nothing to prove, except that he would stay. Her mother came to visit one day, shuffling across the dusty porch with her cane and a smile that tugged at memory. Julia showed her the kitchen, to be, described where the cinnamon would live, the window that would catch morning light just right. Her mother stood in the middle of the empty room and closed her eyes. "It already smells like you," she whispered. And Julia nearly cried. But not everyone believed. Rumors started, quiet, cruel things. That it was a vanity project, that she was just another poor girl rescued by someone rich enough to pretend love was a game. One afternoon, as she wiped sweat from her brow, a neighbor muttered under his breath as he passed, "Wonder how long that'll last." Julia's grip tightened on the mop handle. But William, hearing it too, just walked over, pressed his hand gently to the small of her back, and whispered, "Let them wonder." At night, when the noise faded, they sat on the porch in silence, side by side, not touching, just breathing the same salt-heavy air. Sometimes they talked about opening day, sometimes about bread, but mostly they talked about fear and how it meant they were doing something worth the risk. And one night, beneath a bruised purple sky, William turned to her. "This place saved me," he said, "and you don't even know it." She looked at him, eyes soft, voice steady. "We're not building a business," she whispered. "We're building a life." He nodded once. And in that moment, with no crowd, no signature, no ceremony, they chose each other again. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Chapter 10. One ring, one rooftop. The soft scent of vanilla and orange peel lingered in the air. The ovens were off for the night. The windows of the newly finished bakery still glowed with the warmth of the day. All laughter, coffee steam, and second chances. Chairs were stacked, lights dimmed. Julia stood alone behind the counter, wiping down the marble surface that had once been just a sketch on the back of a receipt. Her fingertips moved slowly, more memory than motion. This place had become her skin. Footsteps padded across the wooden floor behind her, quiet but familiar. "You're not supposed to be working," William said gently. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm remembering." He smiled as he walked closer. The moonlight cut across the room in stripes, falling softly against the framed chalkboard menu she'd lettered by hand. "You remember what this place looked like the first time we stepped inside?" "You mean, when the ceiling leaked and the windows screamed? Or meaning you saw something in it that no one else could?" She turned to him then. He looked nervous. That wasn't like him. "Come with me," he said. She followed him out the back staircase, hand in hand, the cool wood planks whispering beneath their feet as they climbed. The rooftop had been a last-minute idea, a flat patch above the inn, nothing special. But William had cleared it, strung soft lights overhead, and placed 2 folding chairs facing the ocean. It wasn't grand. It was perfect. The sea murmured below, stars blinked overhead, and in the space between wind and wonder, he turned toward her. "I had this whole speech planned," he said. "Something poetic, something worthy of you." Her heart was already racing. But then I realized, the most honest thing I can say is that I never knew who I was until I met the woman who gave away her last dollar without flinching. He pulled something from his coat pocket. A box, small, velvet, trembling in his hand. Julia's breath caught. "I didn't fall in love with you because you saved me," he said. "I fell in love with you because you didn't need to." His silence was holy. You saw me when I was nothing, and every day since you've helped me become something. He dropped to one knee. The rooftop disappeared, the waves vanished. Time held its breath. "Julia Monroe," he said, voice cracking just once. "Will you marry me?" Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit like it had always belonged there. He stood, pulling her into his arms as the lights overhead swayed in the wind, the ocean clapping somewhere beyond the dark. And then he kissed her. Not like a man staking a claim, but like a man finally coming home. They didn't build an empire. They built a place where people lingered after coffee cooled, where locals came not for luxury, but for warmth. A place where Julia's lemon shortbread sold out before noon, and where tourists stayed not for the view, but for the feeling. They didn't change the world, just each other. Julia hung her apron on the same hook every night. William kept the books, fixed leaky faucets, and learned the difference between cinnamon and cardamom. They fought over recipes, danced in flour-dusted kitchens, and read letters from guests who'd found hope in the simplest of things. A smile, a room with soft light, the smell of bread at dawn. And no one ever guessed that the man serving breakfast had once owned a tower with his name on it, because he didn't care who he used to be. He only cared about who he came home to. Their wedding was small, barefoot on the beach, vows spoken in the language of quiet hearts. No cameras, no press. Just her hand in his, and a future that no longer needed proof, only presence. What does it mean to love someone truly? It means choosing them, even when the past is heavy and the future is uncertain. It means seeing them, not for what they can give, but for what they quietly carry. It means showing up again and again, when no one's watching, and especially when it's hard. Julia never needed a rich man. She needed a real one. And William, the boy behind the suit, the man behind the silence, had to become that before he ever truly deserved her. So maybe love isn't built in grand gestures or perfect timing. Maybe it starts with a stranger on a rainy bus ride, with the last dollar you give away not knowing it's the beginning of everything. If this story reminded you of something you've felt, if it echoed a moment when you believed in someone, or stopped believing in yourself, tell us. Tell us about the kindness that changed you, the dream you dared to chase, or the person you never saw coming, who stayed. Type your story below. Let the world remember. Love doesn't ask who you are, it asks who you're willing to become.